Hello, and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. Today's podcast focuses on two Central High School graduates who made a name for themselves in the literary arena. Gordon MacQuarrie was a newsman, a storyteller, and the nation's first outdoors writer. An avid hunter and fisherman, MacQuarrie is credited with establishing the modern school of outdoor writing. His magazine stories of the Old Duck Hunters Association, Inc., a fictional group based on friends, family, and neighbors in the Barnes area, remain popular today. John William J.W. Beecroft graduated with MacQuarrie from Central. Beecroft began his career as a salesman for Crowell Publishing and went on to become the sole editor of Doubleday's Literary Guild, the Book League of America, and the Dollar Book Club. As an editor, he made choices that influenced what millions of Americans read. Helping us dive into the story today is local historian Teddy Moronic. Hello, Teddy.
Hi, Maria.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, what was it like dipping into the life of Gordon MacQuarrie?
I guess I had a preconceived notion about his writing.
Okay.
And after spending the last few weeks, researching him and reading what he's written, I've become a huge fan. Huge fan. The newest member of the Gordon MacQuarrie fan club.
Why? What is it about his writing that makes you a fan?
I guess I thought at first that, he was writing about things that I'm not really interested in, hunting and fishing. As someone has said to me, I'm not really an outdoorsy person. I'm an indoorsy person. And so I guess I thought that's what he was all about, but he really wasn't. He's really about relationships, either your relationship with nature or your relationship with other people. And that comes through in his writing. And that's what made me a fan.
And he grew up in Superior.
He grew up in Superior, went to Blaine grade school, went to Central High, and the normal school in Superior. So he was educated here. And he is one of the group of people that I find sort of amazing and extraordinary who came from Central High School. If you dip into the history of Central, which I have along with Kathy Loxo to write our book about Central High School, it's amazing the number of what we would call famous people walked the halls of Central High School, and Gordon MacQuarrie was one of them, the class of 1919, which also included the other person we're going to talk about today. Was at that time he was known as William Beecroft, but we know him as J.W. Beecroft. And Gordon was also there when Ernie Nevers was there, when Morgan Murphy, who was later to become publisher of the Telegram, and who else? Oh, Ole Hogsrud. All those people. It's amazing the number of people that came out of Central High School that made a name for themselves.
And they were all in kind of that time frame.
Right.
There, right?
Those late teens, early 1920s.
Okay. Now, Gordon was kind of an outgoing young man, right?
He was a very outgoing young man. If you look at the listings in the yearbook that are beside his photograph in both the Central High School yearbook and the normal school yearbook, he was involved in a lot of things. But I think the thing I find most fascinating about him is that he played drums. He played drums in the school band, and he also played drums in, I don't know if they called it the band or the orchestra when he was at the normal school, but he also did it as a side gig to earn money. Oh,
was he in a band then? Or?
Yes, he was in a band, and he played. That's how he earned money to go to school.
What
he was
band?
Going.
Did you have a name?
No, I didn't have a name. And he played drums until even while he was working for the Telegram, when he first started out with the Telegram. And then after he got promoted, that's when he finally quit playing drums. But he did that for quite a while.
Okay. Did he go right to the Telegram from the normal school then after he graduated there?
No, he went to the University of Wisconsin because he only had a 2-year degree. That's all the normal school offered was a 2-year degree, and it was a teaching certificate. And so he went to the University of Wisconsin to finish up his bachelor's degree. And then he came back to Superior, between semesters, and he got a job as a cub reporter at the Telegram. And then he went back to school. John Murphy, who was the publisher, the first John Murphy, who was the publisher of the Telegram at that time, told him, when you graduate, come back and we'll have a job for you. So he came back, was a cub reporter again, but he got promoted to city editor fairly quickly. And then after that, he became managing editor.
Wow.
So he was, in fact, this is my first introduction to Gordon, really, other than knowing people who were fans of his writing, was when Kathy Loxo and I were writing the book about Central. And then she went on to write a play about one of its most famous people, Lulu Dickinson, who was at the center of a strike, a student strike at Central. And at that time, Gordon MacQuarrie was the editor of the Telegram. And I remember going through the newspapers doing research about that and looking for his editorials to see if he took a stand, because he obviously, having been a student at Central, knew Lulu Dickinson.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very objective in everything he wrote. He did not take a side.
Mm-hmm.
He was just sort of presenting the facts to people as to what was going on.
Excellent. So he was quite the newsman.
He was quite the newsman, yeah.
But his big claim to fame is when he went to work in Milwaukee, right?
Right. Apparently, when he was working for the Telegram, he got job offers from all over the country. And even one of the sporting magazines, I think it was Sports Afield, offered him a job as editor while he was still working at the Telegram. But he took the job in Milwaukee because they were going to make him the outdoors editor. And he was really the first person across the country to be what was called an outdoor writer. Apparently, they gave him a rousing send-off at the Telegram, though, when he left. I thought when I first looked through the newspaper, I didn't see anything about when he was leaving. And I thought, that seems odd. And I knew he was well-liked. But apparently, they published an in-house special edition about Gordon.
Oh, no.
And it was something like, I think the headline on the front page was "Rousing Send-Off for the Unpooper." And apparently, Gordon was the only person who could fix the clogged toilets in the newsroom, and that was his job.
So he was quite a handyman,
right.
too, huh?
I would love to see a copy of that special edition to see what people wrote about him. But then he went to Milwaukee, and he actually wrote his first freelance story about the Old Duck Hunters Association in 1931. So by the time he left the Telegram, he was getting to be fairly well known in outdoor writing magazine circles.
Right. So he could write for the Telegram, but he also wrote magazine articles
freelance
about this fictional Duck Hunters Association,
yes,
Inc.
The Old Duck Hunters Association, Inc. And the Inc. stood for incorrigible. And if you read the stories, you do understand that was very true. But his father-in-law, Al Peck, who owned a car dealership in Superior, the Peck Foster Car Company, was the official president. He was called Mr. President of this club, or otherwise they called him His Honor. Mm-hmm. And he was the instigator of most of the trouble that anyone got into.
Okay.
And that was the basis for it, was the trips that they took together, either fishing and hunting. Mm-hmm. Yes. And Al loved duck hunting, and he introduced Gordon to duck hunting. So,
okay. Now the stories are fictional, but they're kind of based off of people that he knew in the Barnes area. He had a cabin in the Barnes area?
He was on Middle Eau Claire Lake, and he and his father had first built the cabin when Gordon was 16. They took the train out. Was it to Gordon? They took the train from Superior. And then they walked 16 miles to the place where they were going to build the cabin. They walked it, Maria.
16 miles?
Yes. And Gordon's father was a carpenter employed by the Superior School District, and he was also a cabinet maker. So he knew how to build a cabin. And it seems like Gordon was interested in having a cabin, but he wasn't quite as interested in building a cabin as his father was. And his dad said he would go off and he'd, follow deer trails, and he'd do all these things instead of, doing what he was supposed to. And they had that cabin for, I think, about 20 years, and then they built a new one. And he and his father built it again. But Gordon's father didn't think much of Gordon's chosen career.
Really?
He used to say to Gordon, "It's only typewriting, Gordon."
And we're talking typewriting, not nothing electronic, nothing digital.
No.
Back in those days, how did he write his stories?
Apparently the Milwaukee Journal provided him with a station wagon that he drove around Wisconsin looking for stories. It said that he drove about 40,000 miles a year.
Wow.
And I think it had the Milwaukee Journal's name painted on the side along with his, so he couldn't be incognito. But he would sit in the front seat with his manual typewriter on his knees and type stories. He would get them done. He would put them in the overnight post wherever he was in Wisconsin, and they would get to Milwaukee the next day.
Okay, so he was a roving reporter.
He liked, I guess 40,000 miles was the average during his entire career, where he traveled, talked to everyone. Mm-hmm. Very outgoing man. Awesome. Usually drummers are, I guess.
Excellent. And now one of his stories even got turned into a children's book.
Yes. Oh, this story actually made me cry when I read about it online. It was April of 1945, and a mother duck had decided to build her nest on pilings in the Milwaukee River.
Mm-hmm.
And Gordon found out about it, and he wrote a story about it. And it just took off like a wildfire. I think everyone was sick of, the war and all the sad news and all of that. And this was sort of a bright spot. And so Gordon followed this story as long as it took, to get the ducklings hatched. And one of the stories I just thought was so touching was one of the baby ducks fell into the water, and the bridge keepers got out in their boat and they went looking for this duck to save them. And they found him and put him back in the nest. And Gordon referred to her, he called her Gertie or Gertrude. She was Gertrude the duck.
Okay.
And a few years later, there was a book published, Gertie the duck, that was published about the story. Gordon didn't write it. He had passed away by then, but they did put up a statue of Gertie.
In
And
Milwaukee?
it's still there on the pilings in the river. So she's well remembered.
Yes, and it was a popular book, right?
It was a popular book. The news stories, I guess, went, everybody, the Associated Press picked it up, and it was across the country. They said one day there were 2,000 people out there watching Gertie.
That can't have been comfortable for the ducks. They're like, oh, wait.
No, I know. And in fact, they actually captured the whole family of ducks and moved them to Gimbel's department store and put them in the window for a couple days.
How did they do?
They were
the department
okay,
store?
but then they moved them out to like a wildlife sanctuary, which I was happy to read about. But
Definitely.
yeah, but they were like superstars. They were like the Kardashians.
But with feathers.
Yes.
Okay. Very cool. And now his stories have not aged out, have they?
No, I don't know what it is about Gordon. I think we were talking about how I think it's just his writing style. They're a little dated, but they're so heartfelt. The two that I love the most are The Day I Burned the Oatmeal, which is about Gordon and his father-in-law. And Al seems to have been, his father-in-law, Al Peck, seems to have been rather a risk taker.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going duck hunting one day, and Gordon eventually, as the story ends, had to rescue him. And at the end of the story, Gordon had been making oatmeal. Al wanted his oatmeal. And instead of Al saying anything like, thank you, Gordon, for coming out in this terrible storm and saving me and all of this, he just looked at Gordon and he goes, and you burnt the oatmeal. And the other one was called Nervous Breakdown. And I think that was written after Gordon had a series of tragedies in his life. His wife and his daughter both got tuberculosis and were in Middle River, which was the hospital that in Douglas County that took care of tuberculosis patients. And he was working in Milwaukee, so he had trekked back and forth to see them. Al had died, and his father had died too. And he wrote the story about a man who was involved in his job and wasn't the person he was, say, 20 years ago when he would go out and enjoy nature. So this guy decides to take a break from everything. He's just falling apart. He knows he's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, takes a train. I love this. Takes a train from Duluth up to the northern part of Minnesota. And I thought, wow, the days when you could do that. But he goes out and he spends 3 weeks in the wilderness, just being who he was before.
Oh, wow.
And you knew that Gordon was writing about himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I love those stories.
I understand that his stories are popular, and I know down in Barnes they have an exhibit. The Barnes Area Historical Association has an exhibit there.
Mm-hmm.
They're only open in the summers, I believe, but and a lot of like his old typewriter
Right.
and decoys and things.
Yeah, I think they have his duck boat too. Yeah. So I'm going to have to make a trek down there to see all of Gordon's, now that I'm a real Gordon MacQuarrie fan.
Right. So all it takes is reading his work and you realize.
Yeah. And he must have been a fun guy to know. I mean, he just seems so interested in life. And he was an early conservationist. He was one of the people who promoted like deer herd management early on and, trying to get the land back to where there were certain birds, and other wildlife that had been chased out because of, the cutting of timber and all of these other things. And he was really a proponent of, we've got to start thinking about this or we're going to lose it all. Okay. So he did that really early on.
So not only did he have an impact on the outdoor writing, but on conservationism.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Very influential. And sadly, he died young.
1956. Yeah, he had a heart attack. So too bad.
Yeah. Now, his classmate, J.W. Beecroft, was not quite as outgoing, correct?
No, I would believe that they were probably polar opposites.
Really?
And I'm not sure if, other than the fact that they both worked on the yearbook at Central High School, I'm not sure if their paths ever crossed in any other way, because I think Beecroft was in a way an introvert and Gordon was probably an extrovert. And Gordon was, of course, an athlete. He was a pole vaulter. A champion pole vaulter, and the whole drum thing.
Right, very outgoing.
Very outgoing.
J.W. Beecroft, who was more studious and introverted.
Right, and Lulu Dickinson said that by the age of 12, he had read more literature than probably people twice his age.
Wow, he also a Superior boy.
Also a Superior boy, born here, just like MacQuarrie. Both had parents who came from Canada.
Really?
Yeah, they immigrated to Superior from Canada. And J.W. Beecroft actually went to kindergarten at the normal school.
Oh.
Because it was a teacher's training school and they had kindergarten classes there, and he went to school there. And apparently then when he went on in school, he had trouble reading.
Oh, really?
Yes. And teachers mentioned this to his mother, and he told the story about how his mother would sit with him every day, and they would sit outside the house and she would help him with his reading, and they would move around the house as the sun moved. And he compared that to how in New York City that people were trying to get away from the sun because it was too hot. Where at Superior, you were looking towards the sun because it was always so cold. So
okay, but he graduated and he moved on to work in the editing industry.
Right. Yeah, he and Gordon both graduated from the normal school, first Central, then the normal school, and Beecroft went to New York City and he went to Columbia University, where he finished his bachelor's. And I also read somewhere that he had a master's degree from Columbia also. And he started out, I think this is funny for someone who considers himself an introvert, is that he actually acted on Broadway, in bit parts.
Really?
Yeah, and he had been a star of their senior class play at Central High School too. He had the lead. So I don't know.
What was the play? Do you know?
Oh, it was nothing that anyone would ever even recognize nowadays. Yeah. Sort of a melodrama, I guess. But he got rave reviews in the Telegram, so he must have done all right. Yeah.
So to New York, had a couple bit parts, but was also going to school.
He also went to school, and then he started working, I think, for the Literary Guild for a while, or he was in publishing. And then he took off and he went to Europe for a couple of years. He spent some time in France and Italy. And Lulu Dickinson, when he was in high school, convinced him that he should probably study French. So he took French language lessons from the nuns at St. Louis Catholic School in Superior.
Oh, I didn't know we had French nuns here.
I think St. Louis was actually what was considered the French parish in Superior. It was like, we had 2 Polish parishes, and then we had the Belgians out in Eloise. And, so there were various ethnic groups that had their parish districts in Superior. But so he did that when he was in college. He also had to take French, and he flunked it 3 times, I believe. And they said that the professor passed him on the 4th just to get rid of him.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
I know.
Saw something early and then kind of loses it.
Yeah, French just wasn't his thing. So... And then he spent a couple of years in Europe, and he came back and he started working for the Literary Guild then. And that was just at the start of the Depression. Lost his job there, went to Russia, of all places, took his savings. And he was, like a lot of people at that time, interested in socialism. Okay. So he was going to go to the Soviet Union and get a firsthand perspective of, did socialism work? No, it did not. According to John Beecroft, there was no butter, there was no milk, there was only brown bread. And he said that they offered him a job there to proofread their translations into English of some books. And he said, well, you couldn't live on what they were going to pay you, although they did offer to get him an apartment. He said, an apartment for myself? He said, no, you'll have to share it with 2 or 3 people. So then he came back to the United States and he started working for the Literary Guild again. And this time he became head of it. So he chose books for everyone across the United States, what he felt that they would want to read. and that would become their selection of the month.
Okay, so this with the guild, they would send the books out
Right.
to people, so people would subscribe,
Right.
and they would just get whatever books
John had chosen. Yeah,
Okay.
they didn't necessarily have to take the one he chose, but most people did. I think it cost them $18 a year at one time for 12 books.
Ooh, that's a good deal.
Right, and he himself read 12 books a week.
Wow.
And skimmed 25 others on average.
His reading improved.
Yeah, it did. And he would only go into the office a couple days a week. He would stay at home and read for the rest of the time.
Okay.
And he felt that because he was from the Midwest, that he knew what people wanted to read. The average person, he was in the literary circle of New York City. He said he avoided authors and he avoided literary parties because just not to be tainted, I suppose, by people's opinions. But he said often at literary parties, all they would talk about was how much money they were going to make, which must have been against his Midwestern principles, I guess. I don't know. But he came back to Superior in 1947 and did the commencement exercise for the graduating class that year.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, I helped Leo Herzl, who taught English at the university, and he's written quite a bit about Beecroft. And I had done some research for Leo about Lulu Dickinson, and he gave me a copy of Beecroft's address to the graduating class. And I think I might have read it at that time. And so now I went back and I read it again. I was sort of struck in a way that I hadn't been before. Here's this man who had spent, probably the first 20 years of his life in Superior, and that was it. And, back and forth to visit family after that, but never living here again. And during this address, all he could talk about was how important the lessons that he learned here in the beginning of his life, how important that the way Midwesterners lived and how they lived their lives, how important that was to him, and not only to him personally, but how he did his job. Because he thought that he had a Midwestern sensibility that allowed him to know what people wanted to read. He wasn't going to make them read something that he thought would improve their lives. He wanted them to read for enjoyment. And he thought he was the perfect person to do this. And obviously he was. He did a fine job with the literary guilds. They had up to millions of subscribers at one point, right? At one time, they sent out 75,000 copies of books per day.
Wow.
But I hope he was telling the truth in this commencement address, because if you read it, it almost sounds like someone who's disillusioned with what they've become in New York City, or what New York City, which seems so tantalizing to you in your youth, is not that way anymore. And he kept harking back to what he had learned in Superior, what he had learned at Central High School and at the normal school, and what his parents had taught him, and how he was so grateful to have these memories and to draw on what he had learned here. And then I read something, I think it was in one of Leo Herzl's articles, about someone had made a comment, well, he was only playing to his audience. I don't know.
Unless you could talk to him today, you would never know.
And he came back in 1961 and gave another commencement address, but I think he might have used the same one.
Just recycle it.
I could not find a copy of that address, but there were quotes in the newspapers, either in the college newspaper or the Telegram, from it. And I think it may have at least been partly the same but who would know? I mean, this was 14 years later.
I always wondered when J.W. Beecroft Books opened here in Superior. I did not know the story of J.W. Beecroft. And so learning from you today about him helps me understand why there was a bookstore that was named after him.
Right. And I think that the thing that Beecroft wanted, I think what he was looking for, especially in 1961, because he had retired from the Literary Guild in 1960, he was hoping that he wouldn't be forgotten. And they were going to build a new college library at UWS. And he was hoping that maybe they would name it after him, but they named it after Jim Dan Hill.
And whatever did Jim Dan Hill do to deserve it, right?
But then when the bookstore came about, Jan Murphy, there's a quote in the Telegram, I believe it's in the Telegram, about the store. And she said they had hired a firm to create a logo and a name for the store. And this firm had looked into Superior's history and came up with Beecroft. And she said, what a perfect name. It shows people how there were extraordinary people who came from this town. And I thought that was just a lovely quote, because if you look into the history of Central High School, you know that there were extraordinary people who came from Superior, Wisconsin.
Definitely. People like Gordon MacQuarrie.
People like Gordon McQuarrie.
People like J.W. Beecroft.
J.W. Beecroft.
People, and all of their classmates.
Right. People like Bud Grant. Ollie Hogsrud.
Ernie Nevers.
And Superior has a national figure skating champion from Superior, Wisconsin, Bobby Speck. So small town, big things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's interesting to learn about these two gentlemen. What was it like for you diving into, because did you know much about them when you started?
I knew a little bit, having written the book about Central, but I had no idea. I'm just fascinated with both of them. And I do feel like maybe we do owe John W. Beecroft I don't know, a statue. I don't know, a plaque somewhere.
How about one for Gordon?
Oh, Gordon. I don't think Gordon will ever be forgotten.
Isn't there a wetlands area outside of town named after him?
Right. And I think there's some award. I don't know if they still give it every year, but there was a Gordon MacQuarrie Award. And also at UWS, there was like a travel scholarship that Beecroft had set up. I don't know if that's still going on, but we shouldn't forget them.
No. Well, hopefully this will help people remember them.
I hope so.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.